Hello, and welcome to this video all about the event editor within the Bryntum Scheduler component. During this video, we're going to learn how you can configure the event editor to meet your needs within the context of a React application. But first of all, what is the event editor? Well, the event editor for the Bryntum Scheduler is this little menu that comes up whenever you double-click an event. You could also get to this menu by right-clicking an event and choosing the Edit Event item from the context menu. By default, the event editor comes with fields for the event name, the resource that the event belongs to, and start, date, and time fields, as well as end date and time fields. That's what things look like in the browser, but now let's head over to some code and see how we can work with the event editor there. First off, note that I've got just a simple application set up that powers what you just saw in the browser. We do have the Bryntum Scheduler component used for the page. We have the Bryntum CRUD Manager loading data in order to populate the events. And we have some columns being configured here so that the people on the left side of the page show up next to all the different events. Great. The first thing we need to do in order to configure the event editor is provide the event edit feature prompt to the scheduler component. Now, this prompt takes a configuration object, we'll call it event edit config, and define it as reactive data just above. Perfect. Now, one of the simplest things we can do with the event editor is simply disable it altogether. Now, over in the browser, when we try to double-click an event, nothing happens. Likewise, when I right-click on an event, the Edit Event option no longer exists in the context menu. Since we are working within the context of a React app, this is all reactive data. Therefore, if I open up the DevTools and then change my disabled state to false, this does immediately affect our app, and the event edit menu is back. Likewise, if we wanted to dynamically disable our event edit menu, we could do that by extracting the set event edit config function from the useState function, and then call it in reaction to some event listener, like the click of a button. That would behave just the same as what we did in the DevTools. Great. As you might expect, there's also a lot more that we can do besides just disabling the event editor menu. We can also customize, add, or remove any of its widgets or buttons. Now, by default, the editor comes with all the widgets and buttons described in this documentation that you see here. This can be found in the docs under Guides, Customization, and then Customize Event Editor. If we scroll down just a little bit, you'll see all the default widgets, or you might think of them as the fields within the form, as well as the default buttons. So by default, there are 3 different buttons at the bottom of this menu. There is the Save button, the Delete button, and the Cancel button. Indeed, you can see that in our project. To give you a feel for customizing the event editor, let's try deleting one of those buttons. We have a snippet of code right down here that shows us how to do just that. There is this editor config option. Under that is bbar, which stands for bottom bar, and then we have the items that are included in the bottom bar. Finally, we target the delete button and set it to false. Great. Let's copy this bit of code and bring it into the context of our React application. Over in the browser, sure enough, the delete button is nowhere to be found. Besides removing buttons, we can also remove widgets by nesting into the items property and then setting the widget that we want to remove to a value of null. This time, start and end are only the dates. The time on each has been removed. Sometimes, instead of removing a widget altogether, it makes more sense to customize some of its properties. You could do that by targeting the widget name and providing an object value with the properties that you want to override. In this example, I'm changing the label of the name field from name to title. Then for the resource field, we could move it up the list by changing its weight to 0. Indeed, in the browser, the name field is now labeled title, and we've moved the weight of the resource field to 0, which puts it up above the name field. Depending on what kind of field the widget displays, you can view the various properties within the API documentation. The relevant docs are found under API Docs, Core, Widget, and all of these different fields here are available. Some of the most popular ones are the text field, the number field, and the date field. Finally, this widget class here is the base class for all other widgets, so this can be a useful resource as well. Sometimes, instead of just customizing existing widgets, you need to add a whole new widget that isn't provided by the scheduler out of the box. For example, maybe you would like to provide a way to add notes to each event. We can do this much like customizing an existing field. First, we target the new widget name. This is custom in our case. We'll say note field. And then we can add any of those properties that we were customizing previously. Things like the label. We'll call it notes. We can also customize the type. And then we also need to provide a name. This name matches up the widget with the data on the event. So make sure all the events in your event data have this note property. Back in the browser, sure enough, we now have a field to add notes to our events. Finally, if you need to customize which widgets display dynamically per event, you can use the Before Event Edit Show listener. Let's create a handler now called Handle Before Event Edit Show. This is going to receive a couple of helpful things. First, we'll get the editor instance, where we can target and modify properties of specific widgets, and we'll also have access to the event record so that you can check the current event data and customize your widgets accordingly. As an example, I could show the note field for all the events except those with the name of right-click me. Double-clicking on the sports event does still show the note field now, but double-clicking on right-click me does not. In conclusion, the event editor comes with sensible defaults that get you going really quickly, but it's also super easy to customize while still being flexible enough to fit your exact needs.